So I wanted to talk a little bit, well, a lot about scale-ups and a bit more about open science and what it allows us to do now. And I've chosen Manchester as a case study throughout so that we can see a little bit more about the city that we are in and the impact it is going to have on the open world going forward. So a little bit about my background. It's a Canadian voice that you hear. I originally came over to go to the London School of Economics. And my first degree was in political science. The second was in econometrics. And then I became a computer programmer because it's never too late to learn how to code. I then worked in business as a computer programmer for about 5 years, and I went off to study at business school. I then started my first startup, or joined my first startup in 1994, which sold in 1997 to Euromoney after I had started a second startup, which was floated on the stock exchange in 2000. And then I became a portfolio person with, I guess, sort of a portfolio of different things. One that had to do with policy, and they're doing some things in the policy arena, Innovation Launchpad, which was helping central government procure from small and medium-sized companies, an ambassador for London for tech. On the large size, I'm an angel investor in 55 companies and have loved nurturing and helping those companies. Some of them have grown quite big. The latest one that was sold a couple of weeks ago was LinkedIn to Microsoft, which is interesting. I haven't yet decided what I think of that one. I'm a LP in a number of venture capital rounds, board of Raspberry Pi, which is a tiny computer company. And again, on the human capital, I sit on some larger boards, Cambridge Assessment and Cambridge University Press. I'm fascinated with the imparting of knowledge and then also the assessment of whether or not knowledge has been acquired. So learning is a really important sort of something I have a fascination and curiosity about. And I sit on some large companies as well. And that weird amount of experience has given, again, just some observations about scaling up and about how the economy works and about how open data can now be used and open science can now be used to allow us to do things that we couldn't do before. But now that we know that we can do them, it's pretty exciting, the opportunities in front of us. So I wanted to start up with when I was first learning how to be an entrepreneur, you'd hear about first mover advantage. And you thought, oh, the most important thing is that I have to get there first. And then through working with my friend and colleague Reid Hoffman, really, and spending quite a lot of time in California, it was the observation that the person who had the idea first almost didn't matter at all. What really mattered was the person that managed to get that idea to scale. So it was more about execution and that journey that got the customer buying it the first time and what you did to it in order to make them buy it the second time and the third time and the fourth time. And it came across the realization that in other countries, their ecosystems were different than ours. But that was a good thing, because if something is different and you still want to do the same thing, that gives you a lever that you can pull, an action that you can take. So I'm going to talk about scale-ups, and scale-ups are definitely not startups. It's companies that have existed for at least 3 years, because you are gathering data on the company and how it's performing over time. So you start, and again, the technical definition that we've chosen was the OECD one, so that we could compare how our ecosystem here is doing compared to other countries, so that we can see how we catch up to other countries and in fact surpass other countries. And we're in some ways are header behind anyway. But the point is that you're not picking winners. The people who are picking winners are the customers, because they want the products that are being produced by this company. You want at least 10 employees to start, and then you want to track the growth for 2 subsequent years. It's almost easy to get a year of growth. It's very, very hard to get several years of growth, and there's absolutely something innovative there if the company is managing to get years of growth. The important thing is, in the olden days, before we had data systems that allowed us to track reverse cohorts and sophisticated analysis, we had to go on things like size of company, or age of company, or what sector is it from, or what region is it from. But I think we don't need to do that any longer. And in some ways, policies that are related to just size or age or sector or region can lead you down paths which don't maximize your economic growth and your competitive advantage as a region or a city or a country. And the impact of policies can have is illustrated in this graph. And you can see here in 2011, the UK, which is the blue line, because of its policies, surpassed even the United States of America in the number of startups per 100,000 of population. So we became better at starting up companies than even the United States in 2011 because of the progressive policies that we had around entrepreneurship and at universities. And that is a great thing until you understand that there is no connection between economic growth and competitive advantage and the starting up of a company. So this graph shows the number of companies that were started, and then 10 years later, those that still had no employees. So if a company is started but it has no employees, it is not connected to economic growth, which is about jobs and turnover of companies. You look at the small employers, and again, not huge growth in the overall macroeconomic patterns in the UK. And if you look at large employers, the number of companies that we get to grow from startup to 10 employees to 50 employees to 250 employees, we don't do well at all. And if you look at other countries like Canada and Denmark and the US, we do less well. And that gives us some productivity issues, and it also gives us some economic growth issues. But we can do things about it. Just thinking about where the new jobs come from, the new jobs, 100% of the net new jobs in Europe come from companies who have been started 5 years old, less than 5 years ago. But it's not all of those companies, it's the fast growth ones that have the innovations and the high productivity that are creating the jobs. The large employers net are actually shedding jobs. So if you're in a university or you're in a school, you want to be able to focus people at those employers and those companies that are going to keep on hiring. You also want to ask your question about what can you do for that small proportion of those companies that are growing to make it easier for them to continue to grow. The other thing that I find interesting, and it goes back to the small companies not having the ability to fund some normal PR or lobbying processes, but the high growth small companies in the UK generate 3 times the number of new jobs each week than the large companies do. But you wouldn't know that if you only depended on the media or what you read in the media or necessarily what you heard from government. It is easier to identify a large company than a small company, or rather, it used to be easier to identify a large company than a small growing company. But because of the openness of our society and our government and the existence of social media, it is now possible to identify the fast-growing companies. And if we can do that, that's a great thing. I want to linger on this slide just for a second. It's quite a complex slide. On this side here, you've got more companies in the UK. And then on the bottom is more in the US. And what you can see is that in the UK, we have a huge number of companies that neither grow nor shrink. And we have more companies in the UK, there are more companies in the US that shrink than shrink here, which means that talent is being held hostage in the static companies and in the slow growth companies, and they're not moving to the fast growth companies. And that means that we have a less dynamic economy here, particularly than in the US. And if you're interested in what the European figures are, in the report it goes through every European nation and what the data tells us about the fast growth firms and how dynamic the economy is. I didn't have that much time, but the point is we want more fast growing. Now, we actually have more hyper fast growing companies in the UK than in the US, which is great. But we want to get more that are growing at 5, 10, 15, and 20%. And is it possible to influence that with policies or policies either of the government or policies of a city or policies of a science park or policies of a university? And the great news is it most definitely is. And if we were to reverse that and come up to the same number of large companies per 100,000 of business population that they have in the US, which is 0.7, and we're at 0.4 in the UK, if we were to close that gap, if we thought it was possible, and it is definitely possible, there's no shadow of any doubt, the net value to the economy in additional turnover, this is net, over the next 15 years is 225 billion pounds. On a gross basis, it's 1,400 billion with no additional spend. By changing a focus from startups to the growing companies, the very small number of growing companies that you can now identify, you can stimulate this much more economic growth than historically. And that's really interesting, and it is that and what we can do to stimulate that we're going to turn to next. Again, scale-ups are not startups. There's a lot more startups than scale-ups. It's like saying, a startup, think of it like, I've got pregnant. And a scale-up, you can think of it being, I have a grown-up child that is contributing to the world. There's a lot of process between getting pregnant, having birth, and then having the child go through with the community, sort of the education and other things. And let's think about some of the things that we can do. So I studied under Michael Porter when I was at Harvard Business School, and he has written books on competitive advantage of nations. And that definitely influenced the way that I think about things and view the world. And it's a good way to view it. And I guess it goes back to going from a micro business, one company, and then thinking, if we got a higher proportion of them, what does it all add up to? What does it allow us to do? And are there things that are happening to these little companies that either the universities can influence, or the LEPs can influence, or the central government can influence? And working together, there are many, many things that we can do. The report interviewed more than 300 practitioners in 75 countries and listed 30 different case studies of what inspiration we could take from both elsewhere and what inspiration we could take from right here in the UK. And if there's a pocket of innovation in the UK that is getting a much greater proportion of their companies to scale than elsewhere, then we should just get the people who seem to be succeeding with the people who haven't yet met their ambitions and see what we can do to change that. And that is definitely what we're doing and why I'm very excited about what you're doing at the Science Park in particular. So I wanted to move on to, even big companies think it is good to have more small companies. And again, it comes back to talent and skills. And talent and skills is something that I'm going to come back to quite a few times today because it gives us our pipeline of people that can work for these scale-ups. And that's important. This goes back to, I went back to Michael Porter after and showed him the report, and this is what he said about it. And again, he was talking about how it gives you actionable insights. So it's not an academic work. This is not academic. We all have something that a great contribution that we can make. And the mindset is using existing resources effectively. Rather than providing support. And it's on targeting that you can now do. Just sort of looking at, again, some of the other European colleagues, they have changed their policy focus from startups to scale-ups very effectively. Oops, I went back. Okay, and going on what Carlos was saying yesterday is economic growth doesn't just happen in cities that focus on startups or large companies. It really goes to those that focus on scaling them. And I would go across a level and say science parks, only because of my colleague up here at the moment. There is a huge role for universities and science parks and local government and local ecosystems. And without us coming together as an ecosystem, we won't get to that 225 billion, but we can. So let's just turn to the UK. You may think that it only, scale-ups and startups are only in London, and it's definitely not true. The data does not bear that out, and that's one of the things that I love about open science and open data. You can get at the numbers and you can find it out. So if we look in Manchester, this is the number of scale-ups. There are less than 10,000 scale-ups in the UK. There are millions of companies, but there are a very actionable number of companies that are growing at 20% per annum. And on the one hand, that's bad because you'd want to have more of them. But on the other hand, the fact that there's only 233 in Manchester means that you can set up very targeted programs to help them grow bigger, to help them make those acquisitions, to help them expand into other countries, and to help them hire the students that happen to be at your university, or help them think about how to hire the students that may be in your classroom if you're a secondary school teacher. And that's a really important thing. It doesn't matter if you look on a map or if you look in a league table-like thing. This is borrowing from Founders for Schools, which is a data science company that mines government data and combines it with social media data. But what you can see here is the number of businesses per LEP in the UK that have a million in turnover, and where that turnover is increasing at all. Not just at 20%, but at all. And you can see in here. The other thing that goes through is the student-employer encounters. So how many of those business leaders are speaking in schools to talk about the jobs that they are creating? And that is now being monitored at a school-by-school basis across the UK. And that is very exciting. Because it allows you to see where the laggards are. And if you're not focusing on employability and careers in the schools, that will give you a headache in a few years' time if you're not doing that. And again, I just focus on here. Manchester has not a bad number of companies, but it's 1/10 of the student-employer encounters per 100,000 of population at the moment, as far as we can see. So it looks like there's probably a way to go on that. Now, given that this is a science festival, I thought I'd look into some of the science information. And the good news also is that not all science comes from London. It's scattered around the UK. And you can see that there was an analysis of the top 50 fastest growing science-based companies. The list was created by nominations from the Royal Society and the Science Museum. So started with a big list and then said, oh, which ones have real proper science behind them? And then looked at how fast they were growing. And the average growth rate of the science-based companies is a whopping 92%. Now that may seem very good, and on the one hand, it is absolutely brilliant, but I can tell you as someone who has led companies that grow that fast, it's not so brilliant when you're leading it, because it's actually really hard to hire enough people, and then for the senior leaders that you have hired to keep them motivated and acquiring the skills ahead of when you need them. How do you, work appropriately and roll your product out into 9 or 10 different countries? Well, if you haven't done that before, it's really quite difficult. And if you don't know who else has, it's even more difficult. So it's brilliant that they're growing that fast, but that says to me, I hope that there is support and assistance being directed intensely at those companies that are growing at 92%, because they need it. I hope they're in a science park. I hope they are enjoying shared infrastructure. And I hope also that we're helping them get fast scale-up visas. Who's done it in another country that isn't close by, that it's a lot easier for them because they should qualify. And in other countries, they qualify for scale-up fast growth visas and scale-up fast growth programs. And we should do that here as well. We already are doing it to a certain extent, but I'm arguing that we should continue to do it. Just building on some of the conversations from the other night, it's the scientists that translate their science and their research into products and services that are used all around the country that drive our economies and drive our economic growth and drive our countries. And they don't operate in a vacuum. And the brilliant thing about Manchester is there's a good number of them from here. And this disruption, which is different business models created in environments like this, so that are really, really important to all of us. So back to a map rather than a league table. And I'm just going to show you a clip between Cambridge, and then I'm going to show you another clip with Manchester. And this is all from open government data, which allows us to see things that we couldn't see before. So this is in Greater Cambridge and Peterborough. You can see the shaded area is there. This is highlighting in Cambridge the 186 companies that currently are growing at more than 20%. If I wanted to see the revenue bands, I could see that, and there's another slide coming up that shows you that. If I clicked on one of those companies, I would get a profile which will have dug that data out of Companies House and dug that data out of LinkedIn to show you about the person leading that company. Now that's actionable. If I want to contact that company, if I'm a business, or maybe I'm UKTI, or maybe I'm a science park and I want to know who are the fast growing companies within 5 miles of me, this allows you to do it. It is free, and it is available, and it's been operating for a couple of years. And again, it goes up to more than 150% growth. This goes again onto what universities can do. So the University of Cambridge uses this to highlight to their students and to choose the projects that they're offering consulting on. And that's important. And they also use this to help them get their city deal. Again, it's the expertise of the students that feed these fast growth companies. And they took a policy decision that they were going to highlight not the big companies that were shrinking, but they were going to highlight the fast growth companies because they felt they needed a bit more help. So let's look at Manchester. So this shows the distribution of companies in and around Manchester. It shows the number that are growing from more than 20%. If I had just clicked this button, it's as easy as clicking this button. If I'd clicked that button, the map gets very messy. It gets colored with red, which is good. But you can see the same sort of thing. And if you wanted to know more about them, this is not dead data. You click on it, you see who you know, and you can contact them in 2 clicks. This is very actionable. This is not statistics. It is things that you can act on, and you can reach out to the person. I was talking earlier about, we were really pleased a couple of years ago that the Manchester lab felt that this sort of data and this approach would help you drive your economic growth and your own fate, which I'm not going to talk a lot about Brexit, but is even more important given things that have recently gone on. Apologize for the slightly blurry graph. But the one thing that we learned from the projects that are going on around the world is that you can't just expect government to make everything better. And you can't just expect educators to make everything better. It's only through working together as an ecosystem and really considering the network economics that we will get to where we need to go. And I can't even remember if I've got a slide talking about this, but what is really important is that if a party trying to do it on their own is the cost of acting alone is about 90 times higher than acting in collaboration with others. So the cost of creating a job can be as low as £300, £400, £500. But if a party is acting on their own, the cost of creating a job can go up to as high as £30,000, £40,000. And that doesn't help anybody. In fact, it probably hurts others. So I'm going to go over the what we could do. What are the levers that we can use to bring about this new shiny world filled with jobs? And the first is identify scale-ups. And luckily, the government, through Companies House, allows us to see these fast-growing companies in the UK. In many, many, many other environments around the world, it is impossible. And that's sad for them, but it is. So, so I think I'm really pleased with that. There is a delay on the data. The data that's released is about 1.5 years old or stale, which means that it's perfect for schools and universities because they don't need to intervene. They're really just trying to point to the fast-growing companies so their talented students can go work for them. But if you are a financier or you are a provider of coaching and mentoring, you don't want 1.5 years delay on finding out where the fast-growing ones are. So we've asked for additional data to be released from HMRC, and I hope that this may happen in the foreseeable future. But it's brilliant where we are anyway, particularly for the UK. It can help us eradicate the scale-up gap here. The skills gap is really important, and I'm going to talk a lot about it later. It's the only thing that I am really worried about in the UK. Because it's not getting better right now. And it's perfect in a scientific meeting such as this and a university setting to focus on that, because the biggest role that we can play as educators is turning our own policies and information so that people, the students, the talent that currently is making decisions that don't make them employable by science-based scale-ups, we can change that by helping them do that. And actually this festival is exactly that in so many ways. Leadership capacity gap. When you speak to the scale-ups here and you ask them to force rank the barriers that they are seeking to overcome, the second most important thing that they talk about is leadership capacity. And what has happened is that the number of people that have grown a company from 50 employees to 1,000 employees in this country is there are not a lot of them. And that means that when someone is on that journey, it is harder to match them with somebody who has relevant experience. And what we've learned is that peer mentoring is critically important in the UK, and at least if you're at 100 million, you will stop by and you will have a conversation with somebody who's at 75, and you'll help them figure out to get into that country. There aren't enough mentors and coaches or services that have that specialist advice. And we've looked to other ecosystems such as MIT and, strangely, even in Colombia, for inspiration here about these matchings where you can match the people who have grown their company with those that are doing it. But it's really important. It's the number two issue. Number one issue, skills. They can't hire people who have the skills they need. They are turning down customer orders right now. That is wrong, and we can fix it. The fourth is customer gap. There's a lower propensity in the UK, and this is a bit worrying, to export than in other countries. And that is, that's great in some ways because it's just international business development. We can teach people who are ambitious how to put their innovative goods into other countries. And we have a UKTI, which is very, very much helping on that, and have, in the last 2 years, changed their policies to focus their trade missions and what they point out to be the scale-ups themselves. So they are now using these data services so that they can highlight the fast-growing companies, and that's better for them anyway because their yield on missions goes up if they're introducing companies that on average are going 100, 200, 300%. And the best thing is that they can find them now. By using the open government data that I was referring to. So finance gap, with my background, I almost thought that I would be writing a report on how important finance was, but it's actually not. It's important, it's in the top 5, just by the skin of its teeth, but it's not the most important. And if you're an investor and you can't sort out the company that has the innovative product hiring people, and the innovative company can't develop their people, and they can't figure out, because they don't know and they don't have access to people who have done it before, how to export, then the finance is the less important, because you think cause, effect, and what we need to focus on is solving these first three. And if you solve the first three, the finance just piles in. The issue that I spoke about particularly 2 years ago was there was a lot of money for seed, there was less money for follow-on funds, and that is still the case, although there have been several large mega funds created since then, which is very good. What we had found, again, was that the most leading entrepreneurs were, with the scale-ups, were getting financed, and they were getting financed outside of this country. And sometimes the ecosystems were celebrating, oh, yay, they got financed by a big US investor. And that's actually not that good for us as an economy, because when there's a flotation or when there's an acquisition, the funds of the people who own that firm flow into the other economy rather than our economy. So I'm absolutely delighted that the finance gap is getting closed here with funds from here, and that we're starting to make good progress on that. So I'm not worried that much about finance. It's important, but I'm deeply worried about the two things in yellow. In fact, I guess the other should have been green and sort of red and yellow. I probably should have been on a red, amber, green. Next time I do slow this slide, I might do that. And then the infrastructure gap. By the infrastructure gap, I don't mean the things that we wanted to isolate, the things that were only affecting scale-ups, the rapidly growing companies. So this isn't highways, it's not trains, it's not bandwidth, because those apply to micro businesses and to scale-up businesses and to large businesses and to the citizens equally. But what this does talk about are the existence of shared infrastructure. So if you're a life sciences type company, is there a wet lab that you can go into that you don't have to create on your own? Is there a place where you can get that peer-to-peer mentoring of people who might be just ahead of you on the scale so that you can learn from them? So it's the shared infrastructure, the real estate. And what we found, and this was patchy across the UK, it wasn't just it wasn't everywhere. And in fact, I think you have an advantage in Manchester over and above other ecosystems for this, which I would exploit enthusiastically if I were you, which allows the companies that are scaling up to scale up easily. In other places, they have to negotiate 3-5-year contracts with real estate developers beforehand, and that gobbles up their investors' funds. And I can tell you as an investor, I do not want to line the pockets of a real estate developer. It makes me unhappy. I would rather line the pockets of a scientific researcher and employ scientists rather than put all of that investment into real estate. And I think the places that have infrastructure, like the science parks you've got here, are critically important for an ecosystem. Some ecosystems don't have them. I hope that they create them. You have them, and you're creating more of them, and I think it's vitally important for you driving your economic growth and your brand and being a magnet for researchers and scientists and the hungry, ambitious entrepreneurs that want to grow to 250, 500 employees or get their turnover up to $1 billion. So net, release data, we're pretty good in the UK. Increased collaboration, we're actually pretty good in the UK, better than most. Improved skills, we have some issues, big ones. Develop leadership, we're okay. It's not flashing red, but I'm still a little bit worried about it. The international expansion, I think that problem is sorted because of the actions that UKTI has taken and because of the ambition that we have in our entrepreneurs. There's some amazing programs that help scale-ups plot their course. We should do more of them, but the solution that works, that creates the growth, has been found out in the last couple of years. So very excited about that. And championing success stories, this is particularly poignant here in the UK and with women entrepreneurs. And I'll take them in turn. In the UK, you are not accustomed to banging on your chest and saying, I am awesome. Some cultures allow people who exist in them to do that, and that's good for them, but that's not what this culture is. So it's even more important if you're the mayor or the Lord Mayor or the science to hold up our success stories and championing them. because they won't really feel comfortable championing them themselves because of cultural blockages here. But that doesn't stop us from knowing who the champions are. We just need to yell about them because they're not going to have a predisposition to yelling about them themselves. And I think that is also the case for women-led businesses. Women are even less accustomed to drawing attention to the success of their business. But those who are enjoying success, we should draw attention to that, because there are many girls who don't think that they should ever or could ever go into business because they can't see that there are any role models. But there are role models there, but they're not drawing attention to themselves, and they're often definitely multitasking in a myriad of ways. We're doing okay for time. Not doing so. I'm going to start going quite fast. So on the skills side of things, this is the thing that I'm worried about, and this is the thing I would urge you to worry about here. In the different things, there are some short-term levers where you pull a lever and you get immediate joy, like finance and like infrastructure, and you should do more of that. The things that are harder, that, influencing a child that is sort of 15, you won't get that joy for 6 or 7 years before she or he is employable. And that makes it difficult for some parts of some of the players in the ecosystem to prioritize that. But for those of us at university who are educators and the media, and dare I say companies, we can focus on how we help that. And as a local government, I would try to make sure that in the portfolio of your policies, some are, a good number, are focused on the skills. So we think it's really important that schools and colleges and universities can talk about their top 50 fastest growing companies. And in Manchester, I think you should talk about your top 50 science-based companies. And I'm not going to ask you to name the top 10, but I might ask that. Next time I see you, I might ask that. I know a great place where you can find the answer. But I think it's really, really important. If you can't see it, you can't direct people to those fast-growing companies, they won't know to work there. And given that the #1 issue at these scale-ups is attracting talent, it's a circle that squares. And there are some things that really work. Exposure to just 4 business leaders does 2 things. One is it triples the percentage of students that later choose a STEM subject, which is very much in our interest. And the other thing, which is also in our interest but less aspirational, is that exposure to just 4 business leaders has a huge impact, a 5-fold impact on whether or not that student will ever become NEET. And that is really important. For pockets of our population come from households where the parents have never worked. And the only way that we can get and light on fire the aspirations of the children from those households are at school. They won't get the parental support and guidance that I suspect everybody in this audience, if they're a parent, give to their children. But there are pockets of the population where that simply doesn't exist. And we as educators have to do something about that. This talks about, again, it is the #1 issue when you ask scale-ups what is preventing you. Again, 82% say they would be able to grow, and it's their #1 reason why they're not growing right now. If you look at the CBIs, it's a similar story, but because they're large companies, they mix up the results a little bit. But you can see here, their #1 issue from the CBI, which is a mixture of large businesses and small businesses, we know not how fast they are growing because they haven't been collecting that information on their membership yet. But again, you can sort of see that. It's skills, skills, and skills. This is why I'm so worried about skills. In November 2014, we looked at open data by Adzuna at the number of open jobs that were being advertised by these scale-ups, and there was 990,000 of them. Those are jobs that are open. When we looked last year, that number of jobs had increased to 1,200,000. So the number of open positions being advertised right now in the ads in the UK that are not being filled is very high and is increasing. And that doesn't make me feel very happy. And I feel even less happy to understand that when you survey those skills, 92% of them are open positions that require STEM. So again, as educators, it's starting to point the finger at us feeling a lot of urgency about what we're doing. Building on that, the Royal Society did a fabulous report on vision that talked about STEM skills, and they're forecasting that in addition to that 1,200,000, there will be an additional 1 million jobs that require STEM. Those aren't just in fast-growing companies, but again, you'll add on to that. So the talent and the focus on reorienting the talent to want to acquire the skills to work in these companies is more acute. And I'm not sure if you call designing or creating an app as something that's aspirational, but it is forecast that there will be an additional 5.8 million people who will be required to work in companies that are creating apps. So again, if we're thinking about solving the unemployment problem, having our children at least understand what they need to do to create those apps that we use every day on our phones isn't bad advice. This just looks at how fast technology adoption is occurring, and I think you probably all know this. The next one is just talking about, and that's because we started with mainframes, quite slow and lethargic to work with. That's what I used to program on. And then you've got the social media stack, which are again platforms that allow you to spread like wildfire. And I just want to pause on this because it's Uber's rollout, and you can see their software getting better as they release new release on their app. So when they first started, it would take quite a few months before that city had 20, 30, 40%, and it never got much higher than that of people using their app. And then they had a new release, and then they had a new release, and it got easier for their customers to use, and easier and easier and easier. And now you can see when they released in China how fast it got up to their monthly trips. Was it yesterday or Sunday? They released that they had their 2 billionth ride, and they expect to get up to 3 billion in the next 6 months. This is because it's super simple, and they operate on platforms, and they empower members of the ecosystem to do things that they want to do. And then again, the adoption going up that quickly is very disruptive to our lives as educators, because how do we help a child decide what they want to do when they grow up? I mean, obviously, you don't want to be a taxi driver, but you probably want to have some STEM skills. Definitely want to have some STEM skills. And this just talks about some of the stats from The Economist. 1 billion young people will be graduating in the next 10 years, and only 40% in jobs that now exist. And yes, actually, and this is from Sunday, they were talking about the top 10 jobs that there are now didn't exist 10 years ago. What does that do for us as educators? How do we point these, our children and our students in the right direction? Now, luckily, there's some fabulous work done by the World Economic Forum that talks about, in addition to the academic subjects, which are critical, these are the other skills that are important. And this is where the connection between business leaders and the academics and educators coming together. The business leaders can talk about this when they visit the classroom. And if they're enjoying and inviting kids into their workplaces for workplace visits, this is what they talk about. They talk about these being the skills that, in addition to their academic knowledge and their technical knowledge, they use every day to make it in business. And that's really important, and I'd recommend that study to you. I think it's really important work for educators. What do kids want to do when they grow up? Well, the third most important is a celebrity, which is a bit sad. I'm glad business. I'm not so happy about the science one down here. I think there is an image issue that we as scientists and educators need to deal with, because the impact that we can have on our world is really important and actually deeply sexy. But right now, the children in the media and in the culture aren't seeing that. It talks about, again, you've got a difference between boys and girls. As a girl, I find this really worrying. And it talks also, again, between maths and physics. We need to do something about this, and luckily there are some things that you can do about it. This also talks about the age of the intervention being really important. So you can see here, when kids are 10 or 11, they're equally fascinated by science and STEM, but something causes a 25% diminution between 10 and 12. Now that does not happen in other countries. That doesn't happen in other countries is good, because it means it's something we can do something about here. But that is happening means that we should be targeting interventions and positioning this as something that science particularly is important for girls at secondary level and at the end of primary. And it's really important. You see by age 15, 16, again, a further diminution in that, which means you can't wait till they're at university. You have to do it at primary and secondary school. You have to start those interventions and why the impact is there. And parents are really important. You see 55% of students think their parents are the most important. But if they're in the 1 in 8 households where the parents don't work, it's not great that that's the only influence. So then it turns over to the teachers as educators being really, really important in some cases. This just goes, again, the cost to the system of making someone employable by age if they have made poor decisions and maybe not studied STEM and they are unemployed at age 25, it takes a significant amount of funds to upskill them. If you make the intervention at 18, it's probably about $1,000. If you make the intervention at age 14, it's down to sort of it's less than £1 per child to cause them to want to be employable because they've seen that it's an interesting job that's available to them.